Yo, what's going on guys, it's Cynical and welcome back to another video. Today for you guys, I wanted to talk about the Scala ad Caelum that we ended up seeing in the Kingdom Hearts Union Cross finale. I think this is something pretty important to talk about in one specific video, mainly because when this was presented to us in the ending, I was absolutely taken back. At first, I thought this was just a completely different world. And then started to sort of like piece it together in the sense of seeing all of that familiar Scala language, the ancient Keyblade language, whatever you want to call it, sort of plastered all over the place. Was kind of leaning, alright, is this just a different area of Scala? Though I'm kind of finding that hard to believe because the architecture and just everything that we're seeing here looks so not Scala. Right, it wasn't until Sigurd ended up saying to Brain that, yeah, you are in Scala ad Caelum. And although we got a lot of really wacky and just absolutely mind-blowing reveals in that finale, this is definitely one of the bigger things that have been playing on my mind. How exactly does this add up? This seems like just a totally different version of Scala. So I thought we'd do a little bit of a discussion today, just kind of throw my 5 cents onto the table. I would absolutely love to know what you guys are thinking towards this in the comment section down below. Let's jump into it. So yeah, first things first, the architecture and the total design that we saw from the 3 different, I guess, images of this world is just totally different compared to the Scala that we know from Kingdom Hearts 3 as well as Dark Road. The architecture here more so represents an old era London type aesthetic, whereas when we look at the known Scala, that more so represents something along the lines of Santorini. Seriously, taking one look at Oya Village from Santorini, and that right there just screams Scala. Of course, Santorini has been used as a point of inspiration to create a lot of different video game levels, and Scala is no exception. So we have two totally, completely different visual aesthetics going on here. How does this make sense? Now, first, I was thinking that this just must be a totally different area of Scala. Keeping in mind, of course, we've only seen a very small portion of the city so far. However though, when we look out to the outer islands whilst in Scala and Kingdom Hearts 3, aesthetically, all of the architecture still looks the same. It still looks like it retains that Santorini inspiration. Now, when we look at what I'm going to call modern Scala from Kingdom Hearts 3, of course, all of the cities are built on different various man-made islands. They essentially look like cones. These cones seem to be layered with multi-level tiered platforms as the city goes up. So the city is, of course, very vertical. Now, it's extremely hard to depict the ancient Scala, that's what I'm going to call the version from Union Cross, as, of course, we've only seen basically 3 stills so far, and of course, this is a 2D game. But when we look at specifically this still right here, yes, there looks like there's some verticality sort of in the background with the buildings being higher in the back as they go back further. But to me anyway, this more so looks like just taller buildings in the background. This is sort of what they tend to do in town or city environments with a 2D aesthetic, not so much with the entire city being just completely vertical like the modern Scala. Now, of course though, we have to keep in mind, because it seems like this area right here, which is the courtyard fountain area with the statue of Ephemer, and that Sigurd is taking Brain to the headquarters, I'm assuming the headquarters wouldn't be too far away from where they are, especially with that statue of Ephemer being there. I would only assume that the headquarters area, if this ancient Scala is built on a vertical base, would be at the very top, similar to the towers that we see on the top of every man-made island in the modern Scala. To me, anyway, it does more so seem as if ancient Scala is more on flat terrain, a flat base, not so much a vertical base. But this is one thing that is just too hard to depict because of what Union Cross is, a 2D game. Now what we know is Daybreak Town was destroyed, and in a sense this world was reconstructed into that of Scala and Caelum. Xehanort was the one responsible for such thing. This would probably mean that Xehanort, with the debris and remnants of Daybreak Town, ended up using that to construct Scala. We know this because Scala is built on top of the ruins of Daybreak Town, with the Daybreak Town Tower residing underneath the main island of Scala. Now, what I've been trying to piece together is, we know that Xehanort was a baby even during the time of Scala in this ancient setting, with it looking completely different. However though, we also know that Xehanort was also a child or an early teenager when Scala looked the way it does now. How is it even possible that within only, let's say, about 13, 14 odd years, can Scala look completely different? First things first, to explain this, I believe that Xehanort as a baby is from that ancient time of Scala, and the robed figure who obviously brought him to Destiny Islands as a baby time traveled. Yeah, I know I hate the whole time travel thing, but nowadays for the Kingdom Hearts series we are neck deep in it. Now of course, how would this be possible though when the Ark was destroyed? If we remember back to the Union Cross finale, there was at least one Ark pod floating with, of course, Xehanort in it. And for the most part, it looked like that pod was kept in reasonably okay shape. Xehanort would then go on to craft the Scala that we see in the finale, awaiting Brain's arrival in Scala, and tasks Brain to reconstruct the Ark. This would make sense, as of course Brain spent a lot of his time on that computer that controls the Ark. Brain also spent a lot of time researching the Ark. I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility if Brain would have a slight clue as to how to reconstruct this thing, so long as there are some remnants of which left over. And I'm even sure that perhaps there is a possibility that a lot of the technology within the room that the Ark resided in was still left over. Now, I don't know what Xehanort's intentions behind potentially wanting to send Xehanort into the future would be, or just the simple intentions of why anyone in Scala would want to send Xehanort into the future. That we'll find out about at a later point, I'm sure, if of course this theory proves true. Arrives in the future with the mysterious robed figure on Destiny Islands. Eventually, when Xehanort is a young teenager, he is confronted by the brown-robed man, which at this point I am still assuming that it's Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, formless, but of course could still be someone else. He then opens the Corridor of Darkness up for young Xehanort, and Xehanort is sent to the modern Scala. At least with the whole Xehanort thing going on, with him being a baby in ancient Scala to that of him being a teenager in modern Scala, that is sort of the only explanation to me that can make sense. The only thing that would kind of trouble this theory in the way of the whole Xehanort explanation is, yeah, for one, there was only one Ark pod, but Brain could have constructed more Ark pods. However though, we do know that at the destination you're traveling to in the future, there needs to be someone there with the memories of you, as well as a medium, some sort of object that relates to the person traveling. It could be some kind of situation where the old man ends up traveling in the Ark, and at the destination being Destiny Islands, or just present day, there is someone that knows the person. As well as that too, there could be some kind of object waiting in the future. The old man then could have brought through an object from baby Xehanort into that future, and the person with the memories of baby Xehanort is the old man. If perhaps the old man was actually someone from that future that had then traveled back to the time of ancient Scala. Time travel, dude. Dang it! But it doesn't totally explain the complete difference in visual appearance, even if there has been such a large amount of time between the two different versions. I don't think that justifies a complete overhaul in the look of the world. I think there would still be remnants of which that would be in modern Scala. So this got me thinking about the Daybreak Town tower that is underneath. We of course thought that the entirety of Daybreak Town was destroyed, and I'm talking about everything, every last building, and it sort of seems that way from the cutscene that we saw, though it gave us a very brief shot of some debris, and while I'm assuming pretty much most of the world was destroyed because all we see is a lot of water, a lot of debris from different houses, and then in the background, mountains. It doesn't necessarily go to say that we've seen everything. Perhaps, maybe, the tower itself did survive. The ancient Scala we see in Union Cross could still be host to the Daybreak Town tower, with new architecture built around it. At some point, maybe this version of Scala ended up falling to a similar fate to that of Daybreak Town, where it wasn't to the point of complete and utter destruction, but a reset or start over was in order. You're probably thinking though, that doesn't really make too much sense because the city is completely underwater. Did they rotate the entire city? Yes, actually. They might have. You remember at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 how Xehanort ends up rotating, no, quite literally ends up rotating Scala at Caelum? He does some kind of hand gesture and says, down. That rotates the entire fucking world. Now I'm sure that Xehanort probably isn't the only one that knows this magic. What if Ephemer at some point, or some other Keyblade wielders, one of the important ones, part of that headquarters committee, ended up completely rotating the ancient Scala upside down into the water, and crafted and constructed a new Scala on top? If absolutely every last piece of architecture within Daybreak Town was completely destroyed, then why do we see an almost pretty much for the most part perfect Daybreak Town tower underneath the main island of Scala? The thing that is confusing me though a little bit is the mountains off in the distance in that final cutscene. As we know, in modern Scala, we don't see any mountains off in the distance. However, it could also be another scenario of the ancient Scala was built on top of these mountains. As we know, we do see rocks around the Daybreak Town tower, and then eventually flipped, and again, modern Scala built on top. As well as massive boulders scattered pretty much absolutely everywhere underwater. The thing that I'm thinking about that kind of imposes into this theory is, if thinking about the breezy quarters area of Scala, that machine that's there that shows us a sort of diorama of Daybreak Town breaking and then transforming into Scala at Caelum, there isn't obviously any other version there. Of course, it could be a scenario where Ephemer or maybe some other higher-ups wanted to cover the history of the original ancient Scala. So this got me thinking specifically about Birth by Sleep and Aqua's story. We know at the very end of BBS for Aqua's story, she ended up going to the land of departure with Ventus on her back and sealed away the land of departure. The land of departure was then transformed into that of Castle Oblivion. While Aqua is doing this whole magic spell thing to just completely transform the world, she's having like a flashback of what Ericus was saying to her towards the explanation of this specific magic. He mentions that their predecessors devised a certain trick that would enable the user to completely transform the world. Surely Ericus is talking about the predecessors that once resided in Scala. What if there was something so horrible that ended up happening to the ancient Scala that it needed to get sealed away and was transformed into the modern Scala? Also too, we know that Ericus, his Keyblade is the Master's Defender. The original owner of the Master's Defender was Brain, but then was given to Ephemer. I'm sure that magic of being able to just completely seal away and transform worlds either derived from Ephemer or Brain. Of course, going back to it, the other possibility here is that yes, there could just be that much time that has passed between ancient to modern Scala, that over the course of that time, the city has evolved. It has changed. But to me personally anyway, I just find that so hard to believe. I would love to know what you think about this little theory. Again, please be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. However guys, I'm Cynical. Hopefully you're having a fantastic day. And until next time guys, I'll catch you later. Peace.